Hello and welcome to Interview Essentials. In this workshop, we're going to talk about what companies are looking for, how to get prepared for the interview, how to conduct company research, personal preparation, how to prepare for a phone or a face-to-face interview, what are behavioral interviews, questions you might ask the employer, and then how to follow up after your interview. First off, let's talk about what every company is looking for. We've heard back from our employers and we know that they value fast learners, people who can communicate well, especially strong verbal and written skills, a person who is detail-oriented, who knows how to double or triple-check critical data, someone who can work well under pressure and complete tasks on time, functions well in a team environment, whether face-to-face or virtual. In addition, companies need someone who is computer literate, and we've heard a lot about strong Excel skills. Next would be someone who's resourceful. If you don't know it, you can find it. A person who has good soft skills with a high level of professionalism. A person who can protect client privacy and understands discretion. And finally, employers value a go-getter, someone who can go to their boss and say, "I'm done with my work. Is there anything else I can do?" Let's now talk about interview preparation. And the first thing you should think about is your resume. Understand that a good resume usually has several people look at it, and there are several drafts that you go through to prepare it. At minimum, it should be clear of any grammar and spelling errors, and you should always have a few copies on hand in case there are multiple interviews. In this example to the right, you can see that the header has the name popped out in 16 or 18-point font. The full address is on the first line, as well as a cell phone contact and an email address. And if you have a good LinkedIn page, we recommend that you put the link to that. Next would come the profile, and the profile are your selling points that match the job description. Where do you see yourself as a fit? Then, if you're a student still in school, we recommend you put your education and include if you have a strong GPA of 3.5 or above, as well as your anticipated graduation date. You can then include applicable coursework that shows that you have a foundation of skills and concepts that you learned at school that you're ready to apply in your job or internship. Next, you can list your professional experience and notice that there's a clear format that's followed in every entry. It begins with the name of the company, the city and state where it's located on the first line, followed by the title of the job, and then how long you were there. Next, you're ready to put bullet points to show your contributions to the job. You can continue with your next header. Finally, if you have any community activities or volunteerism, you can put that at the end. The next piece of information you need for an interview preparation is the position description. You should have that in hand as you think about your interview. From the position description, you first have to decide whether your skills match many of the basic qualifications. And the basic qualifications are usually listed toward the end of the position description. You should then study the job details. Where is the job? Ask yourself if you can get there easily. What are the hours they prefer, and how many days per week? Other details might be what they pay, and the name of your hiring manager. Proceed to look over the company and understand what sector it's in, as well as other points about the job description. Understanding your position description will help you then anticipate interview questions. The next part of preparation is company research. Company research, you need to find out what are the skills and experiences that the company values. Who are the key players in the organization? Are there any recent events or news about the employer that might be interesting to bring up during an interview? What's the company's culture? What's its mission statement? Do they list their values? Who are their clients? What are their products or services? This information you can typically find on the company corporate website, and it's important for you to click through many of the tabs so that you can answer some of these questions. To get the inside scoop on the company, you can go to another website known as Glassdoor. That will give you frank commentary from existing employees, as well as sample interview questions, typical salary bands, and other information about a company. If you want to do further research, we recommend you check LinkedIn. You might know the person who is going to interview you and find a profile about them. Let's now move to personal preparation. We know interviewing is stressful, so what can you do to relieve stress? Well, it's very important to always, the week before your interview is scheduled, to do a dry run. How long does it take to get there? Is the road easy? Are there any twists and turns or exits that you need to be watchful for? This will help you know and build confidence that you can find the place or location where the interview is. You also need to practice talking aloud. Have a friend or a family member listen to your answers and give you some feedback. Or if no one's available right then, practice talking in the mirror. We also recommend you groom the week before your interview. Do you need a trim? Do you need to cut your nails? Is there simple things that you can do to get your clothes ready? You don't need to spend a lot of money going to a salon or shopping for a completely new outfit. We recommend you choose simple but well-fitting clothes and very simple jewelry. You should have your clothing laid out the night before. And then, of course, the basics. Sleep well, eat well, get an upbeat attitude, and be positive for the day of your interview. So, there are several ways that a company might approach you for an interview. The first thing might be just a phone screen to ask you a few questions as a decision-making point of whether to invite you in for a face-to-face interview, or they may simply do an interview by phone. Both of these have some similarities, and will walk you through some points to help you build a successful presence for either a phone screen or a phone interview. First of all, if you receive a call or an email to set up the phone interview or phone screen, write down the name and number, especially if it's someone who is calling. And don't agree to do a phone interview on the spot. You need time to get prepared. The day of your phone call, 15 minutes before the call, get rid of any distractions. Is there a dog barking in the background? Is there noisy street sounds? You want to try to interview in a private, quiet space, and clearly have a glass of water nearby. At the agreed upon time, answer the phone with a smile. Of course, the interviewer can't see you, but you can transmit positive emotion through the gestures on your face. We recommend using a landline if possible, and stand up while talking. That'll help transmit energy through your voice. We also think you should use body language just as if you were interviewing in person. Those qualities will definitely transfer through your voice. Take notes, because it's sometimes hard to remember what you discussed after the interview is over. So take brief notes during the interview. And in case the phone number or the ID code does not work, immediately send your HR contact an email explaining the problem, and perhaps they could fix it for you by sending you a different code. Okay, now let's move to the chance of getting a face-to-face interview. The first thing we mention and emphasize is location, location, location. Where is the interview? As part of your preparation for successful interviewing, you need to map out the directions to the company. You need to know how long the commute will take, and this is achieved by doing a dry run. And of course, give yourself extra time for traffic, in case you get lost, or if something happens to your soup, like you accidentally spill water or coffee on yourself. So the face-to-face interview. It's all about first impressions. First thing to know is that your interview starts long before you even sit down in the chair. You should be nice to everyone. The security guard, the receptionist, or the HR representative who might meet you. Get warmed up by breaking the ice. Make an observation. Tell a quick story. You can talk about the weather if you want, but it's a way to make a human contact with your interviewer. Of course, avoid commenting on any personal items such as clothing or hairstyle. And don't start asking questions about the job. They'll ask you toward the end of the interview whether you have any questions, and that's the time that questioning will be turned over to you. And of course, make an opportunity to connect with your interviewer. During the interview, use your body language and eye contact to connect with your interviewer. Project confidence, enthusiasm, and good energy, and avoid making any negative comments about recent experiences or past employers. Ask questions of your interviewer if something is not clear, and even though you might not feel it, try to relax. Now let's move to a type of interviewing called the behavioral interview. And in this session we'll talk about the STAR method. STAR is an acronym, and each letter of this word stands for an idea. First of all, in a behavior interview, you're going to be asked to tell a quick story from some point in your past so that the interviewer will know and can anticipate how you might react for the job that you might be placed in. So to begin a behavioral interview answer, you'll typically hear the interviewer say, "Can you give me an example of when you worked well under pressure?" Or, "Tell me about a time when you worked well under pressure." The type of answer you should build is guided through the STAR method. First of all, quickly tell them what the situation was. Describe it. "My last job where I worked as a clerk in CVS." Talk about the task. What goal were you working toward? "Well, on that day, my boss called out sick, and I was asked to step in as assistant manager." The next part of your story should be the actions you took. Describe the actions you took to address the situation, such as, "Well, when I received the call from my boss that I was to step in as assistant manager, I quickly called a team meeting to explain that I would be working with the other workers on that shift to help give them direction." And then finally, you can talk about the result that you got. "Well, at the end of the day, after checking in with everyone on the shift, we were able to get all of our job done. And the next day when my boss came back, I got a good job from him." So in the result, you're going to describe the outcomes of your actions. So in this way, you can put together the situation, then talk about the task, what action did you take, and make sure you include the result. This is critical to put together a completely packaged answer. Here's some other examples of questions that are typically asked for behavioral interviews. "Give me an example of when you demonstrated you were a fast learner." Or, "Tell me about a time when you disagreed with your manager." Or, "Give me an example of when you were resourceful in finding key information needed for a project." Or, "Tell me about a time you demonstrated respect for company confidentiality and did not share interesting information that you learned at work." Sometimes it's best to start writing out an answer and then practicing it verbally. But in any case, from walking through the steps you need to build a good behavioral interview answer, you know that it's going to take some time. So this is why interview preparation is critical. At some point in the interview, you're going to arrive at a time when the interviewer says, "Do you have any questions for us?" We recommend that you always have questions to ask. Why? Because that'll show you're interested in the company and that you were motivated to do company research and that you really cared about this position and that you're really completely interested in trying to get this job or internship. So we have some examples of typical questions that you might want to ask. For example, if I were to start tomorrow, what would be the top priority on my to-do list? Or, what would you say are the top 2 personality traits someone needs to do this job well? Another question might be, what kinds of contributions do you want the new candidate to make in this position? Or, what did you especially like about a previous intern in terms of performance? Of course, you can always interview them and say, what's the best thing you like about working here? That would give your interviewer a chance to talk about key points that they really enjoy about their company and give you an opportunity to connect with them even further. Okay, the interview's over and you're just about to leave, but you definitely want to make a few final questions, such as, When do you expect to make a hiring decision? That'll give you a timetable of when to follow up for any decisions they might make. If you can, ask for the interviewer's business card or write down their contact information. And of course, thank the interviewers for their time. Shake everyone's hands. Reiterate your great interest in the position and ask if you can contact them if you have not heard back after the designated wait time. So then how do you follow up? Well, first of all, within 24 hours after your interview, you need to send a thank you email, preferably even in the same day. You need to check in, email or call a few days after they said they would make their decision to see, in fact, if you're ready for a second interview or if, in fact, they've moved on with another candidate. Okay, at this point, if you were here in person to do the workshop, we would stop and begin practicing a nice firm handshake, a quick elevator pitch about telling something about yourself. We would go through 2 scenarios where you could practice behavioral interview answers, and then how to finish up the interview and say your goodbyes. But we'll leave you now with a typical list of interview questions. Typical interview questions you've probably heard 1,000 times, but guess what? Many interviewers begin with these questions. Why are you interested in working for us? What do you want to gain out of this internship or job? How would you describe your work ethic? Why did you choose your major? Or tell me about an accomplishment you are most proud of. We've talked about some of the behavioral interview questions, which you would use the STAR method for. But some of them, again, could be, tell us about a time when you worked well under pressure, or you effectively worked in a team environment, or when you demonstrated that you were a fast learner. We hope this interview for Interview Essentials has been helpful, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks for listening.